I visited the International Motorcycle Show here in DC, and it was a pretty fantastic show, lots of bikes. But unfortunately, a lot of makers weren't there, like Ducati, BMW, Triumph, Yamaha. So the show is getting smaller and smaller every year in DC, and a lot of the people that were there were telling me that perhaps people are just not interested in riding motorcycles. And maybe that's it, but I still had fun. The new Honda Metropolitan. I've always been a fan of this bike, and it's a pretty nice 50cc scooter. I like that they're modeling it more after Vespa, especially with the speedometer. Everything about it, it's like very high quality, something that I expect from Honda. I like that the speedo is now integrated into the dash. You have pockets on the right, a pocket on the left. You also have the ability to have a button to open up the seat, and I believe it's electronic, but of course the ignition was off, so I couldn't really test it. You also have a hook in the middle to carry your groceries, and you have a nice flat floor so you can put even more stuff in it. But styling wise, it's a really big improvement over the last generation of Metropolitan. The new 2020 Vishram 650 XT. I think it looks good, but I think it looks better in photos and in video. In person, it looks like dog shit. It's not a very good looking bike. I have to compare it to the current offerings, and the current offerings are a little bit better looking. I like that they're into putting in a lot of technology, electronic technology, but that's not really what the adventure market wants. The wheels are nice. It's got spoked wheels, but you don't have to use tubes. That's a great benefit. The XC version's got a bash plate, and it's got all new plastics. The front looks pretty decent. It's kind of quirky like a BMW, which I don't like. It's got an adjustable windscreen. It's got the heavy duty panniers. It's got the handguards that are made out of plastic. You'd expect at that price point to get some metal ones. It's got the beak cloning the BMWs, and you have a carbon fiber looking fender. Overall, it's a good looking bike, but I think Suzuki missed the boat on it. They're trying to keep up with the adventure bikes, but they're not really creating an adventure bike. I wish they had a 21-inch front wheel, more suspension, and maybe even a shaft drive, but I don't think they'll ever do that. This version of the 2020 Vishram is about $10,500, so pretty expensive in my book. This is the bike that both me and my friend Glenn liked. It's the Yamaha Tenere 700. Now, I've been talking about how I want the 1200 Tenere, and that's mainly because you can get great deals, but this 700 looks awesome. I like that they're blending in a lot of the KTM features. The headlights look fantastic with these projector beams. It looks mean, but it also looks kind of like an old school Dakar bike. And I do believe it looks very similar to a lot of the old Teneres, much more than the heavy duty 1200. This is a Tenere 700. And one of the great things about this particular one, it doesn't have a lot of technology. Look at those blinkers. Those blinkers look like they're in an old bike. And one thing I don't like is the gas cap. I believe you have to like put the key in, twist it, and remove it and put it somewhere. I like the ones with hinges. It makes it much more convenient.
It's a tall bike. I'm 5'10" and I can't flat foot it.
5'10" and you can't flat foot
I
it.
got a 32-inch inseam, I can't flat foot it. It's a tall bike.
Limited electronics. There's none of the fancy things, but I do like the speedo. We couldn't turn on the bike to see it, but look at those blinkers, the headlights. Very simple. You can get this from just about every Japanese bike, every budget Japanese bike. You know, at this price, you could either get the Vishram 650 XD or this. I can't imagine anybody wanting a Vishram when you can get this. This bar on top, because a lot of people put their GPS, and it's a feature that a lot of adventure bikes are having. But I think this would be the bike that I would get. If I was to get another bike, and I could afford anything, I would pick this because it's simple and it looks really good. It looks capable. It's also a parallel twin, so it gets really good mileage. And I believe Yamaha makes some of the best bikes, some of the most reliable bikes as well. Now, I had no idea about this 401 Vitplin Husqvarna. I don't know anything about these bikes, but I did sit on these two versions. They have an adventure version and a street version. They kind of look like retro, modern cafe racers. They look fantastic. Whoever decided on styling this, I really like it. I don't think I would buy it, but I think I like it if I had plenty of money. It's one of these bikes that you would get if you want to just kind of putt around the streets, the city, go to cafes. I think Husqvarna makes good bikes. Everything I heard about Husky, I guess, is that they make competition bikes, kind of like KTM.
Here, I believe this has two. I believe this is a thumper with two counterbalancers.
Look at that really large disc brake. That's why you don't need two disc brakes. This is a 373 single cylinder engine. It has a 6-speed gearbox. It's fuel injected. The bike in person feels very small, and I almost compared it to a Grom. It does have that Grom mini bike sort of feeling, and I think that's very appealing to some riders. I feel that this bike could be the next great poser bike. This is the Versys 300, and it's probably one of the few bikes in this show that's affordable, $5,400, and it's a good bike for a beginning ADV rider. It's based on the Ninja 300 engine, so you know this is a very reliable engine, and I put 87,000 miles on the older 250 engine. So this is essentially the same engine, fantastic, very reliable, and I imagine that the Versys is going to be one of those bikes that are just as reliable. And it's also a very simple bike, doesn't have a lot of electronics, so it's not going to be breaking down on you. And it's something you have to admire, the lack of fancy electronics, no special modes, just a very simple bike to get you here to there. And in a way, this is a replacement for the KLR 650. These new 300cc engines are fantastic. I know that Kawasaki needs to bring back something to replace the 650, but it could be a Versys 650. And I think this 300 probably makes a better bike off-road as well, but it does have a lot of plastic and it looks more like a street bike. It seems like it could be a great seller for Kawasaki. Kawasaki builds good bikes. But the more popular version of the Versys is this one, the 1000. A lot of older gentlemen like this. I don't particularly like it. It's kind of quirky looking. It looks very much kind of what a Yamaha FZ1 would be. I like the speedo. It's nicely electronic. It's up to date. But it's just too much, too heavy, and most people don't need this. And that's why I like the 300. I've been looking forward to seeing the V-Strom 1050 for a while, and now I do realize that it looks so much better in person than it did in photos and videos. But I'm not sure why Suzuki wants to go with the 1000s and battle the GSs and the Africa Twins, because they have a much better bike, and that's the 650. The 650 is a great bike on its own and much better than the 1000s. And most people don't need a bigger bike than the 650. They should have concentrated on doing this to the new 650. Eventually, I believe that they will, but I think they missed an important thing. What they should have done, I believe, is discontinue the 1000 because it's not a great seller. It's never been a great seller. It doesn't handle as good as the 650. Of course, I'm a little bit biased because I got the 650. So it's not cheap. So when you compare it to the offerings from BMW, from KTM, and Honda, most people are going to pick Honda. The Yamaha Tenere is also available as a 700, and that's only $10,000. Appearance, sort of aesthetic modifications, but this is pretty much all it is. It's a street bike. It's not a dirt bike. If Suzuki wanted to build a dual sport, they should have put a 21-inch front wheel if they really wanted to compete with BMW, KTM, Africa Twin, all of these. I think that Suzuki knows its audience. It's people that are kind of rational and they need a bike that kind of look like an ADV bike but still operate really well on the street. You could almost say that it's back to the big traily sort of roots for Suzuki instead of going after the ADV crowd. So when Honda, Yamaha, BMW are giving riders the ability to have a full-on dirt bike that's large and capable of going on tour, Suzuki is just making a street bike that looks like a dirt bike. And in a way, that's kind of redeeming. But when you look at the Suzuki 650 like this, they could have made a great job restyling this bike because it is the more important and best seller. I can only assume that Suzuki in a year or two is going to come out with a revamped 650 that's going to blow everybody out of the waters, but it doesn't seem like they did it for 2020. They just kind of made some gimmickies here and there. But in a way, it's good. It's kind of like the KLR 650. The KLR 650 didn't really improve. It just adjusted a little bit, slight improvements over the years, and eventually became a really great bike with a very large aftermarket. Maybe that's what the 650 is all about. This is a bike I never thought would be coming back because it had a weird cult following, but it was a terrible bike. It was heavy. This is a $13,000 bike, and Suzuki brought it back, the Suzuki Katana, complete with a little katana right over there. It's kind of cheesy, but whatever. It's not a beginner's bike, as I understand it. It's a very large bike, and costs way too much. This is the Suzuki Bergman 200. So now Suzuki got rid of the 650 Executive, and the 650 was a pretty badass scooter. I do not like the front of this 200 at all. I wish they made it slimmer, but it's very easy to use, and if somebody had this and commuted, this makes a better commuter than a motorcycle ever does for anybody. For me, especially now that I'm getting more into scooters, this makes a whole lot more sense. And it's got plenty of storage. You got like pockets on the sides. And 200 is a good size because one of the problems with something like this is the 400. The 400 doesn't get great gas mileage. And 650 scooters like the Silverwing do not get better gas mileage than a motorcycle. But a 200, the 200 is like a sweet spot for scooters because they'll get like 50, 60 miles to the gallon still, maybe even 70 if they're fuel injected. And they'll be able to keep up with highway speeds, and they're much more comfortable. I mean, the seats on these things, it feels like I can ride for hundreds of miles and never be tired. I definitely would buy this, and in black, the Suzuki Bergman 400 looks great. Let's go back to the Honda offerings. Of course, I am a fan of the Metropolitan. I'm a fan of 50s, and I like the new Metropolitan. It's been styled extremely well. Honda did a great job with this. It's much more practical. Now it's got pockets on the sides for you to store your phone. It also has improved headlights. The headlights
That's why
great.
I bought it cheap.
Yeah, spokes look good. You got the Ruckus, you got the Monkey. The Monkey I don't quite get. I think the Grom is a better offering, but there are people that are into the Monkey for off-roading. It does have a nice wide seat, as my friend pointed out, so that makes it much more comfortable than the Grom. And it's got like a nice digital speedo, very important. The buttons are pretty good quality, something that I expect from Honda. Is a pretty fantastic bike. I've never seen this up close. This is the Honda Cub, the very popular Honda Cub. It's got LED turn signals. It looks like a scooter, but it's a motorcycle, and it looks pretty badass. This is the important thing. It's got very large diameter wheels, so it handles more like a motorcycle. And look at this, enclosed chain drive. How cool is that? And that's the adjustment for the chain drive. I had no idea about this, but I am thinking about getting one. And this is pretty important. You don't need a key to start this thing. You just gotta have the key with you. This makes a great commuter, but it is an expensive bike. Pricing on this one starts at $3,600. As you guys know, I have a 95 Africa Twin, and it's in the same sort of paint scheme that this one is in. Mine is a regular motorcycle. This one is a dual clutch transmission, which I'm not used to, and I've never ridden a motorcycle with a dual clutch, but I wouldn't mind it because this should be a pretty fun thing. The Africa Twin has not been well received in the United States, and it's never taken top spots in any shootout. But look at this, the handlebar is just so complex. I am not really sure what I'm looking at here. I'm sure it makes a lot of sense if you ride it. I just don't know what I am doing here. Like, it just seems so complex. These bikes are getting so full of electronics that a motorcycle these days is not simple. I think that's why I like the Yamaha Tenere, seeing a bike that's very simple and I can still work on it. But something breaks on this Honda Africa Twin, especially electronics, then you have to take it to the dealer. Luckily, it's a Honda. I've been hearing about the live wire for quite some time, and I did talk to the guy here, and he didn't know much about it, but they had quite a few of these live wires. Styling wise, I think it's bleh. Doesn't look very good. I was surprised that the battery pack is from Zero. So Zero sells them the battery packs. That's kind of cheap. But it looks kind of good. If you're a Harley guy and you have a gas bike, this is a good entry into the electronic craze that's happening now. I just find it to be, for me, I prefer how Zero looks, but even then, I do not like any of the electric bikes that I have ridden, and I've ridden a Zero. This looks like it could be a little bit more fun. I don't know. It's a different style. Electric bikes are really hard to mess up. It's the motor, it's batteries that does all the work. Harleys have been notoriously unreliable, so perhaps this is the only Harley that's going to be reliable. I'm not sure I like charging it up on the top, because then you have to kind of dangle the cord. I prefer it on the side. It's got Showa suspension, which is pretty good suspension. This is the first electric bike for Harley, and it's capable, according to Harley, to reach 95 miles an hour with 105 horsepower. This thing was initially unveiled in 2014. The live wire cost $30,000. That's the start price. And considering that the battery comes from Zero, some of the Zeros cost about $9,000. So you're paying quite a bit of a premium for this Harley. And you have to think, is it really worth the price? You can get 2 Zeros for the price of this, probably even 3 of them. But then again, at the next Rolling Thunder, you might be the only one with a electric Harley Davidson. So it might be worth it. Now, I'm not really a fan of Harley, but this is a pretty fantastic looking Harley. It's the Harley Davidson Pan America. And it's Harley's entry into ADV. And if you don't know, the adventure market is pretty red hot. Everybody wants to ride them. And I have to admit that it's the best type of bikes. They offer great power, visibility. You can ride them in the mountains. You can ride them off-road. They do give you the best of both worlds. And you can ride them faster than a lot of sport bikes in the twisties because they're just so much easier to ride. It's a natural position. And this Harley looks just amazing. This is probably the only Harley I've ever wanted to buy. But then I'm also aware of what Harley's all about. It's not great engines. But this is the most exciting Harley in a very long time, next to the Livewire. And look at this, a chain. This is a first on a Harley. And tubeless spoked wheels. I'm kind of disappointed that they put it under glass so you couldn't really get a good feel of the bike. Another bike that I was surprised with was the Royal Enfield Himalaya. Now, I've seen images and stuff, and it does not do it justice. It looks much cooler in person. It also is a very low price point at around $5,000. And when you walk around the show, all you have are bikes that start at 10,000. So seeing this bike come at around $5,000 was a relief. I don't know